Thank you for joining us. Welcome to Innovate Pasadena Presents. I'm your host, Aaron Fike. My guest here today is Alex Williams. We'll be talking about education, technology, and hacking today. Alex, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So to get started, you recently won the 2017 Hackaday engineering competition. This was an international competition.
Yeah, Hackaday prize is 8-month periods, 8-month competition starting in March. And I've always been doing hardware projects. So when I started doing the underwater glider, which I'm sure we'll talk about, it seemed like a very fitting entry to this competition.
So tell me more about the underwater glider.
So the underwater glider is, lots of them are commercial systems which cost $50,000, $100,000, $250,000. So they're long-range data monitoring devices, mainly used for amateur science and professional research for climate science and tracking ocean systems. So it was particularly interesting to me when it was pointed out, and it seemed like a rather complex system which was within my reach with my experience with mechanical and electrical engineering. Mm-hmm. And the Hackaday Prize, the setting question was build something that's beneficial for society.
Right.
And I knew that these were technologies which were $50,000, $100,000, and not accessible to everyone. So I wanted to make an impact by making it accessible.
So what made you think that you would be able to drop the cost of the system by developing one yourself?
Well, it was the initial thing of looking at it and wondering why on earth it's $50,000. So of course they're highly engineered to last for 5-10 years, relatively uninterrupted, or relatively low maintenance. But it was mainly looking at it and thinking, hang on, they use this industrial grade pump system, which costs $10,000 or $5,000. I was looking at it thinking I could replace that with some medical syringes, which would cost $50.
Right.
Clearly, it's not capable to the same depth or various other specifications, but it did the job to a relative degree. And that was basically the theme throughout with it, how I was able to reduce cost.
How long were you working on the project?
So it was been just over a year now.
Okay.
So I started the project because I saw someone in the year above who'd made a weather balloon that went to the edge of space and took images.
Okay.
I saw it and thought it was pretty cool, but then had a Google and saw that it had been done a few times. So although their take on it was new, I wanted to do something which was slightly more impactful, where I basically couldn't find anything. So it started over a year ago, as I said, as it was pointed out to me by my dad that this is a cool technology, but there's no low-cost versions of it.
How did you decide on the notion of a buoyancy engine? How did you decide the different subsystems and how you would be able to tackle each one of those?
I feel like the preceding thing is, so the three main sections within it are buoyancy, roll, and pitch. So to go through the water, it's a 1 meter, 15 kilo glider. And it has, the main technology behind it is the buoyancy engine.
Okay.
So this is a set of 6 syringes which take in and expel water so that it can become more and less buoyant.
So it sinks and floats and
Yeah.
sinks and floats,
pretty
and this
much.
is how it moves its way through the water?
Yeah.
Okay, and that takes a whole lot less power than a propeller, for example?
Yeah, because with active propulsion, you are constantly driving a thruster, which has a very high power draw. With this buoyancy engine, you can just take in water, turn the entire thing off, and just slowly descend through the water with hydrophiles making. And basically, because you are gliding through the water, you use very little power.
And how long would this submersible be deployed?
Typical missions are between a month and 6 months.
Okay, so
but they
very
can
long
be-
range is,
Yeah.
is critical.
But they can be down to 1-2 days. But the thing is, the active propulsion systems, you're good if they last a day.
Right.
A day of continuous testing.
Okay.
So that's the buoyancy engine, which is the fundamental thing behind it. You then have 2 more systems. So you have the battery system, or the battery pack,
Right.
which is in the center, which is a mass which moves forward and back.
Oh, so you move the position of the batteries itself?
Yes.
To help you dive or rise?
So to control pitch.
Okay.
So there's a central mass which moves forward and back, which consists of batteries and a load of steel rods.
I see.
And because it's quite so heavy, it has a high effect on the moment.
Sure.
So if you move this mass forward, you can cause the center of gravity to go forward, so it
so it dives down,
yes,
or pitches down?
Yeah, pitches down and has a greater angle of attack.
Yep.
Or you pull it back and the center of mass goes back
And
and
it pulls up.
Yeah. So the neat thing about that is you can use that to trim the glider. So you can either dive down at a steeper angle,
Right.
which makes it go far more quicker at the expense of using more energy because you have to transition energy or gliding states more frequently.
Right.
Or you can go shallower and you can travel further but slower.
I see.
But
So
the thing
that
is,
helps control the speed.
yeah, to a
Right.
certain extent.
I see.
So it's a relatively slow thing anyway. It's like 30 centimeters a foot per second.
Right.
But the nice thing with that is it's typically used for ocean monitoring and data collection.
Right.
So it's so slow that you don't have to worry about water flow around it because so that any observations made from it, it's not affecting them.
Now, would it be used for making observations along coastlines, for sure, but is this the type of thing that would be used for deep ocean monitoring or transoceanic measurements, or are you required to be tethered or close to the coastline for some reason?
It runs untethered.
Okay. Yes, it runs untethered. Sorry, that is true. But is there any reason to maintain proximity to coastlines or no?
The main thing would just be coastal tides. So the further away you are, more likely it's just to be swept away.
I see. I see.
So there are different classes, say, of gliders. So you go from the coastal gliders, which go down to like 200 meters or so, to the more deep oceanic surveyors.
So has it been deployed? The unit that you've built, has it gone on its first mission yet, or what would that be?
Not out on the coast.
Okay.
So I've performed testing on pools and lakes, etc.
Sure.
But it's taking it to the next step.
Do you have any idea when that would be, or what the next step would be?
Next step is taking it out.
Okay.
I hope to do that within a month or two.
Okay.
But the entire thing has been pushed back progressively as I have a greater understanding of the technology, which
Sure.
is the same thing with a lot of the projects I've done.
But the whole purpose of the glider is to then put some sensors on board and measure the temperature of the ocean, the salinity, the salt content of the ocean. So that's of value for ocean researchers and climate researchers, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the main sensor suite on it is CTD, which is conductivity, temperature, depth.
Okay.
They're three sensors which, if you do an underwater monitoring platform, that's what you use. It's just the bread and butter.
Okay.
So from that you can determine a lot of things regarding like sea quality and the patterns of nutrients within the water.
Okay. Okay. So it's also of interest to marine biologists
Yeah.
and scientists
Yeah.
along that. Okay. Have any of them expressed interest to you yet?
I've
using
had
your platform?
interest from some people within the research area,
Sure.
as well as like 10 or so hobbyists who have contacted me personally saying they're interested.
Okay. Okay. Would you like to continue with this product that you've developed, or do you also have an interest in working on other new things?
Well, for the last 10 years or so, it's been a case of, let's make an interesting thing. And that's how this started. So it's always been a case of designing something or making something to learn something new. And this was the first large-scale project that I did.
Okay.
And this has taken me far further than I thought it would.
Sure.
I do want to do another project. It's just trying to find the place to get this to, so that I can move on to the next thing and it won't be forgotten. Because the inherent thing about it is it's open source.
Right.
Anyone can take the design files and reproduce it themselves.
Sure. Right.
Which has been of huge benefit when developing it, because I've had people input say, hey, have you thought about this? What happens when you do this, etc. So people all over the world have contacted me with suggestions. So the endpoint for this is where I can get it to the point where it's being deployed, and if I move on, it isn't left.
It isn't left. Someone will pick it up and move it forward.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So it's making sure that I have the community support behind it for that.
Okay.
And then I'll move on to the next thing, which as I've gone on through the years, I've progressed from smaller projects to large projects like this, so it makes sense to go on to something larger.
Okay.
I'm just yet to figure out what the larger thing is.
All right, well, I want to hear about that, and I want to hear more about the initial genesis of the projects you worked on when you started getting into the hacking space. So we're going to take a short break, and we will be back in a few minutes.
You know, we're 140, 150,000 people, which is big enough to have great stuff going on, but small enough you can get your hands around it, right? It's the ideal size city for people who like interesting stuff but don't want to be overwhelmed.
Well, it is amazing that few cities are like ours.
For people that live in Pasadena, it's actually a small town feel with big city resources.
Pretty much can do everything you want in the morning and in the afternoon, from being at the beach in the morning and snowboarding in the afternoon, the right time of year.
I think, first of all, it's the institutions we have here, right? You look at Caltech, it's definitely considered one of the finest research institutions in the world. JPL, I mean, literally rocket scientists. And so many innovations around engineering are related to kind of space travel.
The engineering talent here is actually quite amazing. What you don't realize is that with NASA JPL here, Caltech, and a number of universities nearby, it's a great pool of talent.
There's such a variety of technology history here in the city. Having access to interns and new engineers that are coming out of Caltech was something important for us.
In terms of being a startup and innovation, Pasadena has been in the forefront actually of that for quite a while. Idea Labs spawned a lot of the IT technologies in the 90s and continues to do so.
Because it will give opportunities to little people like me with small business, but I'm sure it could give opportunities to people of any other size.
We do have a great blend of old and new money. People still are coming to Pasadena in great numbers and find it a great place to live and work.
I think of the history that's gone on here, right, in terms of the Tournament of Roses and the Rose Parade and the architecture we have here, but I also think about making history, right? Whether it be, setting up the rover or solving a DNA sequencing problem. So it's kind of celebrating those things we've done, but also challenging ourselves to do extraordinary things that will become part of future history.
And culturally, Pasadena has a lot of wealth. With the university, with the customers that I end up seeing every day, very well traveled. I think, if I'm not mistaken, here in Pasadena we have the highest concentration of Nobel Prizes.
There's a rich group of people that we could always lean on for mentorship in the area because of the other startups and technology companies that were in the area.
We have great institutions of art. Obviously, Art Center is iconic.
I think there's a wide variety that people are able to access depending what they're looking for their children, whether it's something specific around independent learning or independent schools, or it could be around certain athletics or music.
Our mission and vision is to be the financial bridge between East and West, especially between US and China.
So we're actually getting kind of like Silicon Valley type web that you need to have the people.
And you don't find any other ecosystems that are like that have such a high concentration of that technology and design together in a very small geographic area.
So, from here in Pasadena, we are also building bridges to many active points along the Pacific Rim.
Recently, in the last couple of years, there's been a real effort to kind of pull that startup community together and make it very vibrant so it becomes really dynamic.
So even though it's a medium-sized city, you still have all the benefits of the culture and dining experiences of a major metropolitan area. You're very close to LA, close to LAX and Burbank Airport.
It seems like every weekend there's something fresh and new. Whether it's another music festival or a new art festival or some sort of showing in the area that we're surprised with, and it seems that the city has always something new to offer for us.
Pasadena is now my home, and I would say that after 12 years it slowly grows on you. your first reaction is, wow, this is a great city. And then over time, you really get into that next layer.
It's the combination of kind of smart people, livable, walkable city, and kind of problem solvers that I think all those things come together and make this a place where I know I'm excited to raise my family, but also build my business.
Welcome back. My guest again today is Alex Williams. We're talking about hacking, technology, and education. So Alex, let's get back to when you started getting into this space. Tell me about some of your first projects with hacking and some of the first things you learned.
Yeah, so I probably started back when I was 7, 8 or so. So it was playing a lot around with Blender, which is a modeling program for computers.
Solid modeling.
CGI.
Okay.
So rendering of scenes or animations or anything in that space.
So you were a poor man's Pixar.
Yes.
You were making 3D. Okay.
And then from there, it transitioned on to more mechanical designs using SolidWorks, which is a professional mechanical engineering package.
Right.
And then in 2010, there were all these consumer 3D printers coming out. I knew that would enable me to make my own things, so I asked my parents, and I then started in 3D printing.
Okay.
Printing
some of the things you made in the solid modeling programs.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it seemed like a natural progression.
Yes.
And then over the years, used a variety of printers, and I've progressed in my capabilities in both the software and the hardware. So understanding the capabilities of current technology and utilizing that in my designs.
What were some of the parts that you first were making?
These range from like mechanical things like a mechanical gearbox, all the way through to just modeling characters or
right. And this was
more
for
visual things.
For fun, for a hobby.
Yeah,
kind of
well,
thing.
that's the driving force behind this for the last 10 years or so.
For sure.
Yeah, it's something I find interesting, and people have the capability of doing things themselves.
Okay.
So behind all these projects, it's been a case of seeing what I wanted to do, see how it's capable, just looking on the internet, finding someone who's done it, or demonstrates the skills that I want. And then I can pick it up through tutorials, etc. And then, so it went software, hardware, and then as years progressed, I just did more complex hardware stuff going on to circuit design.
Okay.
So a lot of my mechanical projects were very much mechanical and stationary. And then when I was able to add circuit design, I was able to give more control over these mechanical projects.
Okay.
So I did, right back before the hype and the craze, a series of tricopters and quadcopters. So 3 and 4 propeller drones which fly around. And then I've done a series of other things in that space. So a small pencil, which engages children with electronics, and you draw a line, and you draw more lines, and you have a piano. So it's something to engage children.
Right. But you always started on the hardware side, and software somewhat came later.
Software is something that's still yet to come, I guess you could say.
But there's still controls with the quadcopters, and there's, I mean, you can't get away from that.
You can't. From my route through it, I've been very much on the hardware side of things.
Okay.
I've done circuit board design and used this stuff like the Arduino and Raspberry Pi. It's just my understanding of that is not as specialized.
Okay.
So the thing with code is I can't play with it. I can't physically mess it around or visualize it as much.
So you find the building blocks that you need to solve your problem, and you use them.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then if there's something new, I learn it. So there have been a couple of projects with the more software-based things where I've just had to chug through them.
Okay.
Just the way it is when you're working on a one-man team doing everything.
Sure.
You have to be flexible.
Right. But some of the other things, like you have a battery pack in the submersible, so managing the power lines, managing the battery pack. Where did you learn some of those things?
That was just on the fly. All these projects, I've started this entire thing without the formal university engineering degree.
Right.
So, well, I was
as one
12
in their
when I
teens.
started.
Yes, that tends to be the case.
So it's just been a case of, okay, this is a problem I need to solve. Let's Google research until I know how to solve it.
Okay.
So with the battery packs, I started off by making an error or a couple of errors. Quickly realized that battery errors underwater are less than ideal. But it's just a case of looking at what went wrong. In that case, it was a protection circuit. Googling, finding out how to fix that, and then implementing that.
Okay.
It's been it's approaching every new challenge as a problem solver.
What was the biggest setback that you had?
The entire thing didn't go underwater, or it couldn't go underwater without the entire thing leaking.
Okay.
So that was right at the beginning. But for an underwater,
So you learned about gaskets and sealing materials. And,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a very steep learning curve.
Sure.
But as with all these things, there are steep learning curves, and you just climb them.
Right. Okay. Well, then that leads to the next thing I'm interested in. All this has shaped your opinion of engineering and technical education. You were in Cambridge, and you chose to no longer pursue that. Tell me about that decision, and tell me about how you see this moves forward.
Yeah. So in Cambridge, I've wanted to go to the University of Cambridge since the age of 14, 15. I was initially dissuaded by it because I've been dyslexic from a young age. So I thought that would hinder my application. But I always wanted to get to the top for engineering and knew that in the UK that was the top.
Sure.
Or arguably the world.
Right.
Or up there.
Yes.
So it was, I applied, I went through the stages, and I got an offer. I was pretty ecstatic at it.
Understandably.
Yeah. But then went there and realized that for some people it's very suited for what they want.
Right.
What they want is 80 hours a week of academic. What I wanted and what I thought it was 80 hours a week of engineering on the more applied side of things. So it was a quick realization that the current way of thinking about education for engineering is very much from a maths and physics standpoint.
Right.
And what I wanted was more hands-on.
Okay.
There are some courses in the UK coming out for more applied engineering approaches, but they're just so new that I was unsure going through them. So I went down the Cambridge route. I was there for a few weeks, and
then you left.
Yeah, dropped out.
So you see that there's a gap between, say, traditional engineering academic education and traditional technical school education that doesn't necessarily provide, and then there's somewhere in the middle there is what you think should be there that doesn't really exist.
Yeah, there's a whole support structure which is available to some, but not all. Again, it's the future is here, just not equally distributed.
Yes.
So it's just a case of everyone having access to the same things I have.
Right.
So I understand that people haven't been able to grow up with 3D printers, and that's one of the main technologies that's allowed me to develop these engineering skills. So there is a gap to that extent in the support structures, and current makerspaces are helping a lot with that.
Right.
So community workshops that anyone can go to and use a whole range of industrial tools that anyone can use, which you wouldn't personally be able to afford, but you can pay the $20, $30 a month fee so that you have access to them. And I've used a fair few of them during my time, and they're also very powerful. And they're something that weren't around 30, 40 years ago.
Now, do you see this as, so the software industry has more embraced contributors who don't have a strong academic background. If they've got good coding skills, that's great. Do you see that transition happening more in the hardware space now with the Maker Revolution?
Yeah, there's definitely more. Well, it's the barrier to entry, I feel, is one of the main things.
Right.
So with software, you need a computer and some patience, and that's it.
Right.
With hardware, you do require a workshop.
Correct.
And things that are only recently popping up. So we just need a generation of kids to go through that so that there is the same revolution as with the software industry that we had in the 2000s or so. Not quite to the same extent. I'm not proposing there's a .com for hardware.
Right.
With my time in the US has definitely shown that there is definitely something happening on the hardware front in Los Angeles.
Now, are you aware of Khan Academy and other YouTube-based and online learning? Do you see that's what you're talking about to some extent, disaggregating education and having it on and on demand? Is that just an engineering subject area, or could that apply for
everywhere?
All education?
Well, Khan Academy is a video-based system that anyone can use, and it's I've forgotten his name. That's very much available for everything. So it started off as maths, it's now physics, economics, biology, chemistry. It's something that can be applied to everything.
Right, right.
So I feel there is definitely a shift towards the new generation of
disaggregated online learning.
Yeah,
and
those who come through the newer education system, which can be more hands-on and, in my view, a lot more fun.
Right. So what's the future for you then, at least in the short term, working on new projects or continuing your on-demand education?
Well, I want to go down the hardware route. So it's making sure that future projects start from the start, or are started even, with the basis they can take me on to something that can become full-time and can support me.
Right.
So if I don't go through that, the standard route, I need to be much more flexible in what I'm doing.
Right.
So it's finding either a startup or doing something myself which can facilitate that.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you. It's been good.
Thank you for watching Innovate Pasadena Presents. Our guest today has been Alex Williams. I'm your host, Aaron Fike. Remember, stay innovative.